If we understand that every emotion, every experience that we have had, starting with day one of our existence, is carried with us and never forgotten, never lost, and that it can never be erased or expunged. It may not be remembered, it may not be focused on, but it is always there. Then a very important part of the therapeutic experience has to be an understanding of what the individual emotions are about. Now, there's a kind of long history in human history of making judgments about these emotions. Happiness, joy, generosity, love, those are good feelings. Jealousy, anger, envy, greed, those are bad feelings. And there's a kind of universal assumption about those that we carry in ourselves. Very often we haven't even received experience about it, but we just know it's a bad feeling. It's my experience with certain clients. Of course it is. You must. But I think that does not stand if we look at feelings as being generated essentially out of experiences that we have had, that we have actually had, and understand them as responses to experiences that we continue to hold in ourselves as part of our understanding of what life is all about. Now consider some of the bad feelings from this perspective. Take, for example, the feeling of jealousy. It is my universal experience that my clients will say, oh, well, I was jealous, that was bad, a bad thing. And when I ask them, I say, well, wait a minute, what does the jealousy say? What does it want? The first thing that happens in that moment is either one of two experiences, generally now, and very, very unique and personal, but generally. Either the individual will not know that he or she feels jealousy. That tends to be the experience of people who are like myself, heads, that I call. They go to the intellect to avoid the pain of knowing the darkness, the badness. So in general, what are you talking about? I don't even feel it. I had one client that I asked, well, what does that feel like? I don't know. What do you want there? I don't know. You see, and he doesn't realize yet that I don't know is a way of staying away from what the experience really is saying to him. So the not knowing I'm jealous at all, not admitting it at all, is one way of dealing with the pain of the question. It's not that you're not jealous, it's that I don't want to know what that's about. The other side of that same experience, yeah, I'm jealous, I just don't get it, you know. Now that's what the hearts do. You see, they feel it, they kind of know they're jealous, but don't go anywhere else. That's just painful to even know that I'm jealous. And there must be something about admitting that I'm jealous that means you're persecuting me and you're seeking me the badness of myself, you see. Now in either case, you see, the key to understanding, in my view, and to welcoming the feeling is to say, well, jealousy essentially says, I see something I want very much that I'd like for me. Yeah, what's bad about that? You say, well, I'm assuming I'm not going to get it. Well, okay, that's what jealousy does. Often they say that's what envy is. I see something I really want, but I know I'm never going to have it. But you see that if you take it to begin with as seeing something admirable, seeing something delightful, seeing something I would like to have, there's nothing wrong in my seeing it over there and wishing it to be a part of my experience. And my favorite example of that is anger, because anger is, the way I like to say it is, anger gets a really bad rap. And think about it. If you're having a dialogue with someone and he or she is excited and raising his or her voice, and you can shut them up, oh, you're being angry. And they'll back off, because after all, you mustn't ever be angry. It's a terrible feeling, you see. But the way I like to say it, if I just take for granted that I am angry, then the question is, what does my anger want? My anger wants my safety. My anger wants the safety of my life, wants good food, or whatever it is I'm angry about. But the thing about anger is, you see, that it's a passionate, very strong desire for something which, the way I like to say it, stumbles across the rock of inevitable denial. I know damn well I'm not going to get it. I know it's not going to happen. I'm angry because I will not get it. In my case, for example, personally, I don't think I ever spent a minute in my childhood feeling understood, that they really got what was I about, what was I feeling, what was I really after. And so whenever in my adult life I feel like someone doesn't understand what I'm saying or doing, I feel the trigger of that, right? This anger, because I'm not going to be gotten. Inevitably, I will not be understood. Now, I remember that and sense it immediately when someone does not understand it. Now, it would be very easy for me to wage war with that person and, lambaste them. Now, that would be the mistake, you see, because what I would attempt to do there is extract from his or her bloody hide what it is I was not given. And that's the big mistake of that kind of request. I got to get it from somebody else because I never can have it, you see. So to understand that any one of these feelings is an expression of a want or wants of something that was not met is a fundamental aspect of understanding why I feel any kind of feeling in the first place. Now, the great mistake that is made, and this is a fundamental problem in the 21st century because the emotional exchange that is being experienced has become part of our sense of relationship. Now, what I mean by that is that if you stood and looked at it from 1900 or before that, a marriage, a relationship was a contract. It was between your family and mine, between two individuals. And there was no automatic assumption of a kind of psychological, emotional exchange that would take place. But starting, I would say, with 1900 and after, gradually, certainly in Western culture, certainly in the United States, the assumption has kind of crept in that I'm being married, that we're having a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship or whatever kind of relationship. And there's an emotional quotient to it, that I'm going to get something and you're going to give me something. It's assumed that that compatibility has to be there. So what's happening is that he is questing for something he wants very much from her. She is questing for something she wants very much from him. Now, if the violation, if the trauma, if the disappointment hasn't been too severe, it usually can be worked out, you see. Or if there's some kind of compatibility between the two traumas, something can be worked out. But if it's a very severe hurt, and the demand is very severe, if the anger is very intense, if the desire is very strong, and I feel like she is not getting it, you see, I'm disappointed, and the relationship will end. So it all begins with hearts and flowers. He's the perfect man, she's the perfect woman, this is going to be wonderful, you see, and then sooner or later, we end up with the modern divorce rate, which is better than 50%. I'm not being too cynical here when I say that. If you have any doubt about this contest that I'm talking about, the divorce rate is a dramatic statistical support for what I'm saying, you see, because I am looking for something, you see, and I'm going to get it from you, all right? And that's what, unfortunately, more and more defines what I think a relationship is. By the way, it doesn't have to be a heterosexual one. Two women or two men, if they're so disposed, will do the same thing to each other. Why don't you give me what I want, God darn it, you see? Now, it's not wrong to want that if it has not been granted, if my feeling, if my experience is that I have not been gotten it. No, but the mistake is to assume that it must be extracted from another. Something which was legitimately assumed when I was a kid, because when I'm a young person, let me put it that way, I have every right to assume that what I need for the support of my being, of my life, should come from my caregivers, from my parents, from my aunts and uncles, from my extended family. I love the way so many TV programs talk about the value of family, as if that wasn't one of the most deadly places that one can experience. It seems to be, what a delusion that is. But teachers and other elders, you see, are all part of this experience, which I have the right to assume are going to nurture me and help me be myself. And when they don't, I come away with it with a sense of depletion, of being denied, and I look to others for the rest of my life to grant me. Now, it doesn't have to be another person. I could look to getting $1 million. I could look to being bold at every turn, being extravagantly energetic, or whatever I think is going to yield me ultimately the essential experience, the essential part of myself that I am questing for, right? But there's nothing wrong with that desire But what must be understood and what must be a fundamental part of therapy is that I need to recognize it in myself. I need to grant it to myself. I need to have to overcome my conviction that I'm being conceited, selfish, self-important, or too big for my britches, or any other aspect of that, you see, to stand and recognize the presence of this ability in myself. I like to say to my clients, I say, lock all the doors and windows, pull the shades, be alone and get very safe, get fully naked and go stand in front of a full-length mirror and observe who and what is standing there. And what I hope that is first of all, an experience in the shine of that. One client who did the exercise told me he couldn't stand there for 2 seconds, stood in front of the mirror and left instantly because he could not bear to acknowledge himself as present in any way. Well, that's the way he'd been raised. He'd been told that he needed to deny himself that way. So sure enough, he's loyal to the message. He can't have it. Yeah, that's a great beginning. I can't have it. That's the start, you see. But then the other part of it is that I, as an individual, must owe myself the right to stand there, as it were. However I do this, not being a premier, just as long as we do this, and acknowledge, well, I am that. I have this. It's okay for me to feel that I have that. My favorite example is 2 generals. You know, I happen to know a lot about Napoleon Bonaparte, and I often say, General Bonaparte, were you a brilliant general? And the humble, honest answer for Napoleon Bonaparte is, yeah, I'm a brilliant general. Look at all my victories. Look at what I did in this, that, and the other battlefield, and so on. Yeah, more victories I have experienced and led than all the generals of the ancient world that we know about combined. At the same time, you can compare him to someone who was alive when he was. You know, it's McClellan, who was the head of the Union Army in 1860 when the Civil War began. He billed himself as the young Napoleon. If you see his pictures, he's standing around with his, you know, hand, the way supposedly the Napoleonic stance, with his hand inside the crease of his coat. This man, the young Napoleon, billing himself that way, could not produce a victory over Robert E. Lee when he had Robert E. Lee's plans in his possession prior to the Battle of Antietam. Now that's the phony. That's the guy who's too big for his britches. He's the one who teaches us that this kind of thing is conceited, is arrogant, and all the rest of it, you see, because he's a phony, because he doesn't believe it, and his assertion of it, and his excessive assertion of it, is in a way an expression of his disbelief. But you see, if we look upon that as the only way to deal it, then we forget how to deal with it when it's real. When you do produce so many victories, when you have this skill or that ability. Yeah, I'm a great artist. Yeah, I'm a very intelligent person. Yeah, I really can create things imaginatively, and so on. You see, if I don't allow myself the possession of that, then I cannot genuinely share it with anybody else, because either I will envy it, resent it in somebody else, or I will see it and try and extract it and take it from somebody else. No, it's there already. And the allowance of what you already possess and what you already have the potential for is another way of saying the right to invest the gold which you already have to live the life which you're entitled to live. Effective talk therapy to learn life. And it means all this, in my view. I think this is what's important about it. If I'm not learning how to be a me and invest the reality of me, what's the point of all this? I think that's what it's about.